On June 6, 2014, DC Pearson tweeted, Don Draper, we quiero many things. Family, safety, love. But this guy, Tap's drawing of Chihuahua, there's only one thing he heroes. This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. Above all else, this tweet is important because it's good. Or if I may quote former MLB pitcher Brandon McCarthy, Jesus Christ, what a great tweet. But I also think this tweet is important because it is about a subject that was joked about a lot on Twitter, and I think people have kind of forgotten. I think if you weren't on Twitter from 2012 to 2014, you may not know that tweeting about Mad Men was a huge thing. I think we all remember Game of Thrones being a big live tweeted show, but Mad Men definitely was one as well. And this is the best tweet about Mad Men of all time. And what it's riffing on is one of the best parts of the show when Don Draper would pitch an ad campaign. But in this, he's not pitching a campaign from the 60s, he is pitching the 1990s Taco Bell commercials. If you are unfamiliar with these, and I'll forgive you if you weren't, because I wasn't around at this time either, there was an ad campaign that Taco Bell did about a chihuahua that said, Yo quiero Taco Bell. This is a snippet from one of those commercials.
Yo quiero Taco Bell.
The Taco Bell Chihuahua was simply the mascot of Taco Bell for a time. And so the reason why this tweet is funny is because it supposes that the serious ad exec Don Draper was actually behind the ad campaign of having a Chihuahua say, Yo quiero Taco Bell. But he wasn't just behind it, he sold it in the super elegant way that Don Draper always sells ad campaigns. I mean, outside of the disastrous Life cereal pitch. But he's treating it with the same seriousness as he did the Pass the Heinz campaign. And okay, maybe not as much seriousness as the Kodak Carousel campaign, but still a lot of seriousness. And DC Pearson, who is a comedian and a writer who you probably know best as the guy who works at the Apple Store in Captain America the Winter Soldier, he wasn't the only person ever to make an observation or make a joke about Don Draper pitching an ad campaign that is not as serious as the ones in Mad Men. But this is hands down the best. And I swear to you, it's not just me and Brandon McCarthy who think this. Like Raoul said, still the best tweet of all time, frame it and put it in the Louvre. All the way in 2020, Claire DeLune said, this is still my favorite tweet that has ever been put on this website. And it's left its mark on Mad Men as a cultural object for people. Multiple people said things like this from McGellen, which is, just started Mad Men with Sean. This tweet pops in my head every single pitch scene. Or like Cake Mittens, who said, started watching Mad Men, so this goes through my head approximately 9 to 10 times a day now. Or even crazier, the Pan Midwesterner who said, I made my wife watch all of Mad Men just so she would get this joke. But definitely the best riff on this joke that I appreciated the most was actually from the Mad Men subreddit when this tweet was posted there. Forsaken Drawer called it perhaps my favorite tweet ever. And in the comments, ChrisB5583 did a riff that is riffing on the Hershey's pitch scene, where in this version of it, Don Draper says, I grew up in a warehouse. The only pleasure I had from childhood was the double-decker taco. That crinkly wrapper, the soft flour tortilla with only beans, and the crunch of the crisp corn shell inside. If I had my way, you would never need to advertise. Just great stuff, Chris B. The thing about Twitter, where everything moves very fast and people are posting their thoughts at the time, is it is a good time capsule of what was culturally relevant at the time. And I think in some ways, some of the other big shows at the time, like Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones, have kind of subsumed Mad Men's cultural legacy. And that's not completely unfair. Mad Men was never as popular in raw numbers as those shows. But a thing I can say for sure, because I was there, is that at the time, especially among people who were really plugged into arts and entertainment, Mad Men was like a gigantic show that people were always talking about. And it also just is one of the greatest shows ever put on television, and I really hope the young people are rediscovering it because, man, that show is awesome. And I think it's the richness of the show that lends it to jokes like this. Everyone who's ever watched Mad Men can hear Don Draper saying this in their head, even though it's not something Don Draper ever said. And in its own weird way, that's just great writing. From both DC Pearson and Matt Weiner, who created Mad Men. Follow me for New Tweet every day, and if you like the show and you'd like to support me, please go to patreon.com/Museum of Twitter. We get a weekly bonus episode called Museum of Not Twitter, and you get to vote when I cover on Subscriber Sundays.